We are now live with Montgomery County Republican Club's special Direct Line Extra. Tonight we have a special town hall on reopening Maryland schools. Our host, Corine Frank, Executive Director
Hi.
of the Maryland GOP. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Corine Frank. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Republican Party. And tonight we're going to host a town hall on reopening the schools, especially in Maryland, where hopefully everybody's from. If you're not from Maryland, might be informational for you as well if you're trying to get your folks up and running on the reopen movement as well. So tonight we have some really special guests. We have our brand new GOP delegate, Reed Novotny, and I believe he is the most recent delegate to be sworn in on the GOP side. Reed, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, thanks, Corine. I appreciate you all hosting me tonight. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Obviously, a very important topic to everyone in Maryland, probably all around the U.S.
Okay, great. And then we'll have some questions for you. We also will be joined later with Senator Justin Reedy up in Carroll County. And then we'll also have our House Minority Whip, Delegate Kathy Szeliga. So we'll have a couple of questions for each of you. And I believe, let's see, we've got a couple of messages here. Is Senator Reedy here yet, or Delegate Szeliga here yet? Oh, Senator Reedy. Hi, Senator. If you want to go ahead and say hi.
Hello. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing well. How are you?
Good.
And then is Delegate Szeliga here too yet? It does not look like she is with us yet.
I think she'll be a few minutes late, but we can go ahead. We've got some questions, Corine, for Senator Reedy and also for Delegate Novotny. You want to take it away?
Okay. All right. So we'll start. Senator Reedy, if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and start with you. So you're on the Senate side, and we do have a couple of people from the House side. So we have a couple of bills that have been going through, and I just wanted to ask, what bills are you looking at, and what bills are you seeing, and where are we in this General Assembly session so far with some of these reopened school bills?
Well, I strongly support reopening the schools in all throughout Maryland, and I also strongly support not just saying we're going to reopen them, but adjusting the guidelines to a more realistic way of interpreting some of these CDC guidelines so that we can have all the kids in the classroom. One of the things that I think frustrates teachers that want to be back in the classroom, and many, many do, you hear the loudest voices from the union trying to oppose going back, but the vast majority, a lot of teachers want to go back, and some of them, frankly, are gotten frustrated with dealing with all of there's so many protocols they deal with and trying to teach hybrid, and teach kids to a computer and teach. What we really need to do is be setting the tone so we're getting kids back into school. And then hopefully, I would like to see it sooner rather than later, but certainly by the start of next school year, be completely in without any of these restrictions, because the science is very clear now and we have a vaccine. There really is not a reason for us not to be getting the kids back into school. As far as specific bills, there's not one in the Senate to just reopen the schools. And again, it is a county by county process, which is good. We believe in local control of the school system. It's good that the governor has called out and said, let's get reopened. And the State Board of Education has been pushing that. I have a bill to try to give another year of athletic eligibility to high school seniors in the sport that they play, for them if they would like to return just to play a sport. And it allows the counties to set up a process for them to come do that, just like a kid could return to play be in a play, or to come back and play with the band and the marching band for another, which does happen from time to time. This would help two groups of people. Allowing another year of eligibility would help athletes that maybe were on the edge of getting some interest from colleges for college scholarships. But really, more importantly, I represent a community with lots of medium to small high schools, and so just giving a little more of an opportunity for the athletic programs to really get a full season in and have more depth, and it really is something that our communities can rally around. If a kid's going off to college, they're not coming back to play a sport, but if they're staying around for community college, or they might want to go to, we're in the workforce, this would be a good opportunity for them. Right now, so far, that bill has not moved out of the committee it's in, but that's the bill that I'm working on, dealing with schools directly. So yeah, we hope we continue to see progress all around the state with reopening.
Yeah, I hope so. And one of the comments that you made was to help interpret the CDC guidelines. And I know in Anne Arundel County specifically that the CDC guidelines suggest 6 feet, but there was some question as to, does it have to be 6 feet? And could you put students 3 feet apart? And there were some questions about the interpretation. So I do like that you're looking into that.
Absolutely. I mean, because it says to the extent practicable.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, in my county, they said, well, they can sit on the bus together because it's not practical for us to keep them 6 feet apart. Otherwise, we'd have to have extra bus runs, and it's just not practical. It's like, well, what if we just had them in the classroom 3 feet apart, and maybe you restrict, how close they are together in some cases. But our county's moving ahead because we've determined that really, as long as you're trying to follow safety protocols, again, you measure it. If after 2 or 3 weeks you're getting some sort of outbreak in some schools, again, it's not very likely to be too severe. But if you get an outbreak, then you're going to obviously reevaluate. But it's pretty clear. I mean, all around the country, we've had school systems that have been in this whole time. And we know that if there had been I'm sure they've had some infections, of course, but we know that if there had been some sort of mass casualty event, we would have been hearing about it all over the news. It's not happening. They have processes for if they have a school that in Florida, they have processes if a school has some sort of outbreak, they deal with it, they address it. So it's, that's actually really the next battle. It's not just getting open, but it's also saying, okay, let's be open in a realistic way. And I can tell you the battle in the General Assembly, and maybe I'll leave you with this because I know we have some other elected officials on but that may want to speak, but we just had a bill in my committee tonight, a finance committee, that passed out. It's trying to set up a 2-year program for contact tracing, surveillance testing. They call it surveillance testing. Not that that's not creepy, right? And vaccination. They want to set up a whole group of state workers that recruit a whole bunch of people to be like this strike force of people to do it. They want to force the Department of Health to have a 2-year plan for all this stuff. They're acting like where we were like a month ago is where we're going to be for the next 2 years. And it's funded with our tax dollars, and they claim it's going to be all federal funds, but it's like $100 million. And they say it's supposed to be federal funds. It's all tax money. And we're getting to the point where we're going to have this COVID industrial complex, and we got to get out of that. We got to get out of the schools, and we got to, we need to not be thinking that this is how it has to be for another 6 or 8 months. I mean, for now, we're still obviously being somewhat careful, but it's going to be time to move forward and get back to doing what a lot of other states are doing, and is getting back to some level of life normalcy again.
Absolutely, Senator Reedy, and I really appreciate your answers. One thing you talked about earlier is you'd really like to see the schools reopened fully next fall. And I think that everyone listening to this program would agree. But I guess this is a question both for you and then Delegate Novotny, you can weigh in here as well. Is what are you hearing from parents in your district? I know, it ranges from maybe some parents who have a little bit of anxiety, especially with, all of the narrative in the media about how, we're going to have some sort of alleged mass casualty event that will fail to materialize. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, people saying that they're going to move and leave the state if their children can't attend school.
Delegate Novotny, did you want to start?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. And again, thank you all for hosting tonight. So I was just Googling on my phone. I won't endorse any search platform. I was looking on my phone. And Maryland actually is tracking the COVID outbreaks per school, per county. So by my simple math here, there's about 20 positive cases in all of Maryland, right? So a couple in Anne Arundel, a couple in Carroll. I have the distinction of supporting and representing part of Howard and Carroll. But to your point, Ryan, it's a great question. And one of the things coming through right now in the Appropriations Committee that I happen to be on is the funding that was just passed at the federal level. And part of the funding, there's actually a line item that is available from now until I believe the year 24 for a lot of different reasons. It could be for infrastructure and the like. Well, one actually says for school reopening. It says, this much money is coming to Maryland for school reopening. So I went to the AG through our committee and I asked specifically, can we encourage the people who open the most for the most percentage of the people most of the time, 100%, 5 days a week, can we give more of the grant money from the federal government down to the schools who are going to propose to reopen in that way? And, as you can imagine, the first response I got back was, no, we can't do it. It's federal funds. So I asked it again. I just said, hey, not the right answer. Think again. And we have great staff down there. So don't get me wrong. This is nonpartisan, great staff. And they phrased it in such a way that we're going to hopefully, if the committee agrees with me, hopefully encourage the state school board and MSDE to actually pass out grants based on a plan, at least, to get better. So if, say, Montgomery County says, I'm going virtual for the next 3 years, they should not get any funds. If Carroll County, like the great senator is talking about, wants to go 100%, 5 days a week, we should provide them funds, right? So, again, like the senator was saying, we don't have a lot of control in these funds, but if we can move them around the edges to encourage reopening and getting people back to school, it will work, and it will have a great effect on our communities. But over to you, Senator.
Well, as far as, what I hear from parents, and, obviously, probably in Carroll, the most I get is from people who want their kids back in. I do get, though, every time I say something publicly, I'll get some response from people who are really still afraid. Of course, on social media, it can be a little deceiving because I think people are at their most intense. They say things that I don't know that they would say if you were sitting across from them, or even on a Zoom call. And so some people will say, well, you're willing to sacrifice your children and I'm not. And it's like, it's a little bit extreme. On the other hand, even on our side, we see some people will say things that are very, very extreme that they shouldn't say either. I mean, you get it a little bit on both fronts. I think the science is clear, and really great job by Delegate Gniadek pointing out, I didn't know that number, but it's like about 20 kids have gotten COVID, and I don't think we've seen any fatalities or any really serious. And they've had teachers and staff that have had COVID as well. But again, most of the time, the people missing time are contact traced out. They're not. A lot of times, I was hearing when our school system really got aggressive and opened in January, and I was hearing that we had so many people out. And there were some people that were sick, and we don't minimize that at all. It certainly is a little bit of a risk. But there's a lot of people that work in professions that have been at risk for a long time here in much riskier situations. Still, a lot of times what was happening is one person would be around somebody who was sick and would come and say, I think I might be, I might be showing some symptoms, and then anybody around them had to stay home. And so a lot of times it's that kind of thing. And hopefully that's something we'll be able to, that's one reason why I brought that bill up a minute ago that we had in my committee. I don't want us to be doing this when we have a vaccine and we have great therapeutics. I don't want us to still be doing this a year from now with the contact with the with these protocols, and basically like if somebody is around somebody who had some symptoms that they now have to be quarantined. I mean, there's a point where once it was understandable why we were so careful for a long time, but we're going to get to a point where it is time to move forward and treat this virus like a serious, but not it's not Ebola. It's not some sort of thing where once we have a vaccine for it, we need to treat it a little bit less like every time somebody gets it, it's a death sentence, because that's just not the facts. It's just not. And and I think there's a great balanced way to look at it, as we've talked about tonight, that we still want to be careful. We still want to be smart about it. We still want to take precautions, but we can't get to the point, we can't continue to have it act like it's still April of 2020, and because that's not where we are anymore.
Yeah, and Carroll County has been back. I think they were the first school system to go back. Is that correct? So there are definitely some lessons to be learned there, and you guys have forged the way forward. And definitely, hopefully the rest of the state can kind of use what you guys have done and model it and be safe. And as far as I've heard, there's nothing terrible that's come out of Carroll. So hopefully there's some good lessons.
There's been some outbreaks, but quite honestly, one of the bigger outbreaks we heard about was several kids in one of the high schools, and it turned out they'd all been to a party together, or most of them had been to a party together like a week before. So it's like even that, it wasn't really a lot of school transmission. It's been things out in the community, and hopefully we can not that everything's going perfectly, but I think there's some trial and error. And honestly, I think the school board would have wished that they had gotten a little more clarity earlier on, because they might not have even broken for as long as they did to shut down and then come back. So there was some inconsistency there too, that I think now we've sort of worked out how this needs to work. So
Okay, all right, great. Well, we are going to move to our House now. One of our other representatives from Carroll County, even though it's a smaller part. And Reed, I wanted to ask you specifically about a House bill that was defeated very dramatically the other day. We had an SRO bill come through. Can you give us some information on the defeated SRO bill that was recently introduced in the House?
So Corine, I think we kind of talked about before, it was the amendment to the police reform bill, yes or no, or SRO bill in general. So the amendment to the police reform bill, the police reform bill in the House just passed tonight. And it's a totally different bill, and hopefully Senator Reedy can jump in too. It's a totally different bill than was passed on the Senate side. So yesterday, in part of the debate, one of the delegates on the other side of the aisle, I believe from Montgomery County, actually introduced an amendment that would actually remove all SROs. And basically it is because SROs are bad. I really just can't understand why he would actually do it. There is, and I'm not denying this, there is anecdotal evidence that people of color are sometimes targeted and feel like they're targeted. That's not necessarily in debate. But really the debate, I think, is at this point, whether or not we want to totally remove an SRO, or do we want to really look at what is causing some strife with some of these people in the community. So maybe we make the fact that maybe an SRO should be in plain clothes, like at the state capitol, all the MSP wear something like this. They still have their weapon, they still have handcuffs and the like. Maybe that is something we should talk about, not necessarily throwing out all the SROs. Baby with the bathwater is a perfect example. So this delegate also had a bill at the beginning of the session also that was entitled Counselors Not Cops. And it's kind of like one of those things, like we can all agree that counselors are great to have in schools. But what we can't say is that counselors should be the only people in schools, because there is a role that the SRO plays that is very significant in our schools. And I was actually quoted, because I was so moved to get up to speak on the House floor yesterday about this amendment. I was quoted by the left by saying something that said, there is no such thing as the school to prison pipeline. And the funny thing is, I was actually quoting our state's attorney in Howard County, who happens to be a Democrat, who seems like a great guy. I don't really know him. He sent all the facts and figures for Howard County specifically, because we have an SRO bill in Howard County, to our delegation. There were 255 arrests of minors in the year coming up to COVID. Only 10% of those were in the school system. So his direct quote was, although the school to prison pipeline is not necessarily a myth, it does not exist in our communities. And the communities of, I happen to represent Howard and Carroll counties. It does not exist. The numbers do not make that a fact. So even beyond that, and I'll hand this over to other people, I'm very passionate about it, as you can imagine. In 2018, I was not there, all the other members passed the Safe to Learn Act in 2018, which funded SROs, $10 million for statewide funding, grant funding for SROs. And kind of my question back to everyone is, what has changed so dramatically in the last 3 years that this program that is just taking off has to be ripped out? No one on the other side has been able to figure out and give me a coherent answer on that. And then kind of the moral of the story, and sorry to talk so much, Corine, but the moral of the story is that amendment last night was soundly defeated. Delegate Szeliga will correct me if I'm wrong, I think only got 4 votes, 3 or 4, I don't remember, 4 votes total for that amendment. So it was soundly defeated, which really just gives me hope to say that maybe some of the people on the left think that we should improve the SRO program, not just to fund it and remove them. Although the tweets afterwards, like Senator Reedy was talking about, the tweets afterwards said, oh no, SROs are still bad, that we saw on the internet. We just didn't want it on this bill. So that was a long-winded answer, but very important that we get back to school, not talk about removing SROs in virtual schools, darn it. I mean, we're not even there. So gets me fired up.
No, absolutely. And I should have mentioned this when I asked the question, but an SRO is a student resource officer. So for the folks at home who may not know what an SRO is, those are the very specialized officers that go into our children's school. So they were placed there in 2018. So I believe Ryan had a couple of questions next. So Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you.
Sure. Thank you, Corine. And I also want to just acknowledge for our audience, Kathy Szeliga, our House Minority Whip, just joined us. Just to kind of fill her in, we talked a little bit about SROs, but we also, we opened up with our shared agreement that we all want to get back to school and end the virtual schooling. But you introduced a bill, which I'm in support of, and I think, a great idea. While the vast majority of students, want to get back in a classroom, there are some students that have really thrived in this online environment. I think most of us would agree providing that choice is a good thing. Can you talk about your virtual schooling bill?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks for having me on. Hey, Corine, great to see you. And I'm sorry, my camera's fuzzy. I'm not sure. I guess I need Reed, my IT guy, to take a look at my what's going on. I went into settings, anyway, virtual meetings here, it's a little fuzzy. But I firmly believe we need kids back in school. They need to be in school. And in-person learning, it's been an entire year. It's time to do that. But one thing we have also learned during the pandemic is some students and their families are really succeeding and enjoying virtual learning. So there are 33 states across our country that have a full-time public online learning school. So it's not a traditional schooling method crammed online, which is what our kids are getting today. It's a program developed for full-time learning to be delivered online. Teachers are taught to teach virtually. Students, their programming, the curriculum, what they do is all designed to be done online. Again, unlike what we're seeing today, which are traditional lessons crammed into a Zoom call. That's not what this is. So Pearson Education, which is an international education company, is actually headquartered in Columbia, Maryland. They have 24 states that they operate these full-time public online schools, and Maryland's not one of them. But there's another company called Stride. There's a number of companies that do this. So what my bill would do, it's simply enabling, it's a public school option. It allows, because currently counties aren't allowed to do this, it allows any county in our state to develop an online curriculum, to open a fully online school. And my thought is, go to Pearson, put an RFP out, ask Stride, put an RFP out to companies that currently do this. They're very successful at it. Ask them how much would they deliver per pupil. I guarantee you our public school systems would actually make money. So let's say Howard County is getting Montgomery County is getting $17,000 per student per year. If Pearson or Stride or somebody would come in, deliver a fully online program for $12,000 a year, the school system suddenly, making money, so to speak. They're retaining that extra money. They're not paying for transportation. They're not paying to clean the school. They're not paying to light and heat, and they're not paying for any of that. So the savings are huge. And students that want to learn this way will have their needs met. They have wraparound services. They have individualized learning. I mean, it's really a wonderful program. And again, it's not for everybody. But if there's one thing we've learned, kids and some families really like it. So, I'm working with the committee to see if we can get it passed. It's unconventional. So the teachers union is opposed to it. That's a big stumbling block for me to get it passed. Shocker. The teachers union doesn't like it, but it would be hiring certified Maryland teachers. They could join the union. It's not sidestepping any of that, but we know that the teachers union's not good at thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I was hoping that maybe it'd be a little bit more popular since it's a public school option and not a charter school. But I guess, the special interests are resistant to change, which kind of transitions, into another topic I wanted to discuss with all of you, which is, special interests, especially, really in this case, teachers unions have had a huge influence on the discussion over, the reopening of schools. How have you guys seen that pressure in Annapolis influencing your policymaking on this topic? I guess
I'll chime in here. I just did some research on it, and I'm sure that Reed and Justin want to chime in too. And Corine, of course, knows firsthand, but the teachers union is the wealthiest, most powerful special interest group in Annapolis. They occupy a building that's a $6 million building. It's about 20,000 square feet on Main Street in Annapolis, just a football field away from the state capitol, not even that far. They collect about $24 million a year in dues from teachers across the state. And, they're happy to give lots and lots of money away to Democrats. So it is absolutely the most well-funded, well-oiled machine that we have in Annapolis. And it's very, very hard to overcome what they like or don't like, to push the tide away from their will.
Let's be really clear about this. They're the 800-pound gorilla in the debate about a lot of issues. Unions in general in Annapolis, making up for their waning power in a lot of other states, they are out, and they're out in full force, especially this year. We're seeing it with an attempt to unionize a lot of different little county and small agencies that normally would not have ever been unionized before. They're a huge factor. And when they're told no, when the union leadership is told no, like they were in Carroll County, they do not take kindly to it. I actually had a meeting with a number of members of the union, and I said to some of their members who I was having a good conversation with, I said, when you guys lose a battle here about reopening, you should move to your next thing about if there's things you're concerned about for your members, as far as like how many requirements they're forced to do by all these state and federal mandates. Why don't you work with us on getting rid of some of those? Focus on something positive. And actually, to their credit, some of the rank and file members have. I've actually worked with a couple of them on some ideas, but the over the top state leadership is just so strident, and everything is cloaked in a veneer of superiority, that we are speaking for the children and it's just this debate, this whole issue has been a very enlightening, I think, for people around the country. Hopefully it will pay dividends in the future when people hear, oh, well, the teachers union supports such and such candidate because they don't care about schools. Hopefully it's going to be remembered, well, we were the people fighting to try to get the kids back in. And so I hope that happens. But yes, they're very powerful. They spend a lot of money and resources, and they don't really like to have to explain. They don't like to give a rationale for why we should spend more or why we should do more. They don't like having to defend that position very much. It's and again, I know my wife is a teacher. My mom was a public school teacher. I know a lot of teachers, and including union members, and a lot of them at the rank and file level they agree with their union. Sometimes they don't on other things, and they don't always like the strident, left-wing nature. But unfortunately, still very powerful. The political operatives in the union are very powerful.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue, Senator. So I had the great honor of actually introducing for the 10th year in a row, Delegate Warren Miller's Right to Work Act, right? So for 9 years in a row while he was in the House, and I had just recently taken over for him, I kept the streak going. It was the 10th year in a row. So the Right to Work Act, if you're not familiar with it, as he had written, and I filed again this year, basically made it so that it was a choice to join a union. So in the points are very simple. So the right to work is actually implemented in 27 states. We could be the 28th, I keep on saying. Nevada actually has a right to work in Nevada. Nevada has more union members than Maryland does. And so the problem is, for example, in Howard County, even though it's illegal by Supreme Court, the Janus decision, it's illegal to make people join the union, they can still charge them agency fees. So in Howard County, the teachers union, before they made it mandatory for everyone to be a part of, there was only 30% of the teachers that were part of the teachers union. Now it's 100%. So you can't say that one of those people who is either a member or paying the dues, paying the agency fees, doesn't want to be there. I mean, you just can't. And I think Delegate Szeliga, you said it perfectly. I think we should co-sponsor a $24 million pay increase for teachers in Maryland next year, just by defunding the teachers union. I mean, we'll give it all to the teachers. I mean, don't they want higher wages for their teachers? I mean, this is a perfect solution. So I just want choice, like most of us on this side of the aisle. We just want choice for our workers, and the teachers are doing the God's work out there, want to get back, and I know they do. I just don't want anyone speaking on behalf of all the teachers. Let them speak for themselves. Let them join the union or not. Let them support a candidate or not. It should not be a top-down driven kind of solution. So very, very frustrating in my mind.
Yeah, I'm a former teacher also, and I found it interesting. My mom's a teacher, my mother-in-law, my grandmother, both my sister-in-laws, my brother. I mean, we're a family full of teachers. And, I find it interesting that they kind of have a little club. Once you say, oh, I'm a teacher, I have a degree in education, like all of a sudden you're in the club. So it is a little frustrating, I think, as parents when, you feel like sometimes, not all teachers. Look, most of our classroom teachers are salt of the earth, amazing, sacrifice so much time, love their kids to death. The traditional classroom teacher is amazing, but the teachers union is not that teacher. And, we have to hopefully get the teachers to speak up for themselves, because a lot of them want to get back to work. They want to be back in, especially the ones with the little guys, the kindergarten, pre-K first. I mean, they really miss that, presence of being with the little guys. And it's so important for the early learners that they get back in the classroom.
Yeah, and I'll just add a personal note to this. Last year, my daughter was in kindergarten when we moved out of the classroom. And for a child who can't read very well, and luckily she could read a little bit, but she couldn't read well and she couldn't handle the technology. And then additionally, my son, who was in 3rd grade at the time, has ADHD. So for me, we were in such a terrible position with the virtual learning when it came down. We tried it for a little while, and then I eventually had to pull my children from public school to homeschool them because there was just no way for them to learn. And I understand that the virtual school is going well for people, so I fully support that as a choice for some parents. I think that's a great idea. But I just want to kind of come back to what we're sort of talking about and just haven't really stated, is that a lot of these bills revolve around the choice for parents. And I think that's what people want right now. They want choices. They want to be able to send their kids to school or to keep them home if that's what they choose. And I think supporting that for parents is the most important thing that we can do right now. What works for some in this environment just doesn't work for others. And, if I was living with compromised parents or grandparents, I might be afraid to keep them home. And I understand that completely. And I think that's a really great aspect of some of these bills that we're talking about, is they really give parents that choice and they give that power back to the people who really need it.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to pivot here. We have Marcus Alzona, who's a member of our club, on the call, and he's had some experience. His wife is a teacher in Montgomery County, which obviously, if anyone knows anything about Montgomery County, we're dragging our feet. We're going to be the last ones to go back in person, but they're starting kind of a hybrid option for people who want a little bit more in person. I guess from the teacher's perspective, someone currently in the system, what has that been like?
Well, I mean, I really can't speak directly to what every teacher is thinking about it, but the general sense I get is that a lot of them have missed being in the classroom with their kids. They're very, they've been very concerned about the virus and about their personal safety, as everyone has. But they do miss seeing their kids, and I know if, like, for example, if you're a language teacher, one of the difficulties is especially for younger kids, is you start losing the language interaction. So right now MCPS is gearing up to head back, and in fact they're doing it in sort of a phased approach, focusing on a lot of the K through 3 first, and in fact they're about to go in now, and grades 4 through 5. So that's gearing up in the coming weeks. The high schools are going to, and middle and high school is going to be in mid to late April. So they do have a lot of technology behind it, and so there's a lot of positive in there. Though one thing that that you brought up, I mean, your Delegate Szeliga, your bill about giving parents a choice or getting students a choice. I know that there some, it was a lot more difficult for a lot of students being online, but some students did thrive in that. So I think it's really an interesting step to give parents and students that choice statewide. That would be definitely a more interesting angle. And I guess the final thing I did want to mention from all the conversations so far was, I believe I forgot if it was Justin or Reed, but the issue of sending your kids or taking your kids out of the school system. In Montgomery County, I knew some people, for example, who did pull them out of public school and put them into private schools, which in the fall were reopened again, if they had space, or literally moved to a different part of the state or a different part of the country. So just to be in-person schooling. So that is a luxury that only some people in Montgomery County can do. The school closures really heavily affected, the people who I would say really get the most out of public schools and need it the most open. So the more economically disadvantaged parts of Montgomery County, really that's having schools closed and being the last system in the state to open up, I think, or one of the last in the whole country to open up, has really been a detriment to a lot of people in need in Montgomery County.
Yeah, it's been difficult for a lot of people. Kathy, I wanted to, Delegate Szeliga, I wanted to sort of move back to you a little bit. When you joined us, we had not heard about all of the bills. We did ask Senator Reedy and Delegate Novotny just about some of the bills that were coming through and that they were working on. And while we did discuss your virtual bill, I know that there's a lot more going on, especially when it comes to reopening in our schools. Can you give us a little bit more information on some of the other bills that we're seeing come through and that you're part of and that you're keeping track of?
Yeah, thanks, Corine. So our House Republican caucus, and I know the Senate as well, always has an agenda. We're not the party of no, we're the party of great ideas. And so we had a crime package. You did hear about policing, but our crime bills were really focused on criminals and not on lawful gun owners, but really on how do we address public safety? And our ideas were, for instance, people don't know this, but stealing a gun is a misdemeanor. So every year for years now, we put a bill in that makes stealing a firearm a felony. That's crazy that it's a misdemeanor, and it's crazy we can't get that passed. We have some bills on repeat violent offenders, looking and saying, look, if somebody is a repeat violent offender, they need to be incarcerated. And we need to make sure that state's attorneys aren't pleading things down. For instance, if they stole a gun, that's a misdemeanor, they plead that away to nothing because it's really nothing to start with. So, that's been our focus. Also, cameras in the courtroom. to have some accountability for what's going on in the courtroom. Are violent criminals being charged? And I know that Senator Reedy was on JPR, Judicial Proceedings, for many years, and he's been paroled from that committee and now serves on a different one. But he can speak to these crime issues. We also have an education package, and one of those bills is and this one, of course, will never pass, but it was a great bill hearing to say, if any school system in Maryland does not have a fully in-person opportunity for students in the fall, families can take the state portion of the per pupil expenditure in a voucher or a check or whatever you want to call it, and send their kids somewhere else where they can go to a fully in-person school opportunity for kids in the fall. So, it's a good conversation to have those kind of things. And of course, taxes, they passed a paint tax, a tax on your paint. And it's funny, they overrode the veto on digital downloads and tobacco. And I don't know about you guys, Delegate Novotny and Senator Reedy, I'd kind of forgotten about the tobacco part of that bill. We were all very exercised about the digital downloads, the books and I think it was the digital advertising. I'm sorry, they had two modern taxes, but the digital advertising was tied up with the tobacco. And I had a constituent email me yesterday. He went to get cigarettes at his favorite tobacco store, and they told him his cigarette prices are being jacked up like $1.75 a pack. It's some huge amount. And, he was emailing me in great anger. Who did this? When did this happen? I'm going to Pennsylvania to buy my cigarettes. So that is the, logical outcome of those kind of taxes. People who can leave and buy their goods that are being overtaxed in one state, they'll go somewhere else and buy it. It's the folks that are trapped in communities where they can't get out of there. They're the ones that pay the brunt of those taxes. So Delegate Novotny, what other, I know I'm forgetting something else of our agenda.
You brought up a lot of the great ones. I was going to bring up one of the bills that I actually put in also that soundly got defeated because of probably maybe a little lack of understanding from the opposition side, but that's okay. So one of the things I saw as both a parent out here and then also a lot of constituents came to me was the inaction, the inability to actually make a decision. So it was crippling out in Howard County. We had a series of votes at the school board that actually were tied 4-4 on reopening. It was, and beyond that, the superintendent in Howard County just wanted to make a plan to reopen. They wouldn't even allow him to make the plan to reopen. So it was just bureaucracy and inefficiency at its best because we have an even number of members on our school board. It was the largest reason. So instead of having the elected members, we happen to have 7 elected members, having a 4-3 vote or 3-4 vote, they were getting 4-4 votes because we have a student member of the board that was also voting. And I really don't care which way they were voting. The problem was we were stuck. We were just stuck at 0. We couldn't plan. We couldn't even talk about planning, basically. So I introduced a bill that basically said, hey, if you have a student member of the board, which are only 7 counties that of the 23 counties in Maryland that have a student member of the board who can actually vote on anything, not just sit there and give advice and those kind of things, which is great. They just can't make or break a tie. That's all it said. Can't make or break a tie. And it was just the most exciting 15 people who came to testify against it. 12 of them were high school seniors, which was great. Like, I love the advocacy and no sarcasm there. If people know me, I'm very sarcastic, no sarcasm. I wish when I was in high school, I had testified in front of my state legislature. It was awesome. It was really great, but they all missed the point. They could have easily said, why don't you put an amendment on? If you don't like gridlock, if you don't want this, why don't you put an amendment on to have 2 student members? And I would have said, okay, probably not my first choice, but okay, that's a friendly amendment. Let's get rid of the gridlock. It would have only affected 7 counties in all of Maryland, but yet no one was willing to look past the infringement of a student member's rights and look at the actual problem, which was the inaction of people who wanted to get back to school or just wanted to make a decision, which was the biggest part.
Thank you for that, Reed. And I was following that bill very closely as someone who, recent graduate of the school system, remembering voting for SMOB and not always being, satisfied with my choices, but still, acknowledging the importance of getting a vote on the Board of Education. To shift to a topic that one of our viewers submitted, Baltimore City Schools has been in the news a lot recently. This seems to be a recurring trend, but the performance in Baltimore City Schools, to put it simply, is not great, right? There was a story recently, you could pass 3 classes over 4 years and, they were pushing people through and they were graduating or something, things of that nature. None of you represent Baltimore City, so I guess I'll start with Justin. What's going on with Baltimore City Schools?
Yeah, and to piggyback, not great is definitely an understatement, Ryan. So let's make sure that that's out there.
Well, it's really a sad situation. And one of the things that, we spent a little bit of time tonight talking about the frustration we have with the teachers union and the power that they have, but Baltimore City really goes beyond necessarily teachers. I think a lot of times when we talk about the city, we talk a lot about how we want to get, we want results, we want to see results and accountability, which I totally agree with. One of the biggest problems we have in Baltimore is a complete breakdown of the family structure and of really societal structure. One of the reasons we're fighting against these so-called police reform bills so hard in both the House and the Senate is they're the loudest voices that represent Baltimore, and it's really a minority of people. The loudest voices scream and yell about policing and the need for. Most of the loudest voices don't want police reform. They really don't want police. They don't. I mean, some of them have even said that they want social workers, and they want. I guess in their minds they think they want some level of policing. If something bad happens, I suppose. But see, the rank and file, the people who live in the city, polling shows are like, actually, I like having police around. And yeah, I mean, there are things that need to be done better. And I think the problem is a lot of us agree with several of the reform. They're very modest and smart reforms that we agree with. Although a lot of the things that you hear about nationwide in police reform, Maryland already does a lot of it. We may not do all of it, and there's certainly things that could be tweaked and adjusted. And in the Senate, we actually passed 9 bills out dealing with police reform, and I voted for 6 of them. A lot of them made good sense, and we worked together with law enforcement at the table with activists. And some of the bills I voted for, maybe 10 or 15% of the bill I didn't necessarily care for, but overall it was good. I voted against 3 bills, but a couple of those bills I thought a lot of it was okay, but there were some things I just didn't feel like I agreed with. That's why I voted against the bill. There's really only 1 or 2 bills that I thought were really bad, but they over in the House, unfortunately, they've rammed everything into this one package, and it's just not right. And it's very extreme, very extreme. And so what happens, I know you asked me about schools, but when communities aren't safe and when common sense is out the window, it's very hard. My father-in-law taught in Baltimore City schools for almost 20 years. And he was at both a very difficult high school and then he was at an elementary school to conclude his career. And what he saw, he thought going to the elementary school would be easier. And it was a little bit easier in that the violence was not as bad as he saw at the high school. But he would see kids coming to school. Every couple months, they'd be living somewhere else. Somebody else would be taking care of them, coming to school without any food in their stomach, coming to school without proper clothes on. A kid can't learn in that environment. And frankly, to hold a teacher accountable for not getting as good at test results is really not fair. I mean, so that's actually one where reasonable people can say, sometimes the teachers union might have a point with that. But okay, what do? I think we need to pivot. We need our school systems in these struggling areas to really have resources focused like a laser on the classroom and on helping kids achieve the basic skills they need. one of the tragedies of the Kirwan Commission bill that got rammed through and then overrode the governor's veto, and I supported the governor's veto, I didn't vote for the bill, was not that it was so much money, although it was too much money. It was that really you could have taken a portion of that giant amount of spending and said, for 3 years, let's focus in the really troubled areas in our state and spend money directly dedicated to getting kids to where by the 2nd and 3rd grade, they're reading at grade level. And I'm fine with my tax dollars being used to help tutor kids that are disadvantaged. I'm okay with that. And some people may not agree. I'm fine with that. But we need to measure it and have to be accountable. And even that is not going to make up completely for the lack of a family structure. And the sad thing is, as we know, government can't really do that. Some of our colleagues on the other side, and I deal with this a lot in the new committee I'm on finance, I feel like a lot of the stuff that they do, even in the health field, that some of the bills that they push, they don't quite understand why I'm asking questions and voting against certain things. It's because they think that we can set up government structures to resolve all these problems. And what we do is exacerbate the issue because we remove responsibility more and more from people. And so you're asking me, what's happened in the state schools. There's a lack of accountability, but there's also a breakdown of the family structure. And there's the entire thing, the whole situation around Baltimore is really, we see it with police reform. We see it with police being scapegoated for all the problems. We see it with school issues. We just need more money. We see it with, a lot of social service issues. It's like looking for a scapegoat for the problems that we have and not having any personal responsibility. We can acknowledge that they can't all, the city can't pull itself up completely by itself. But we've had this other extreme where there's never any accountability or responsibility. And so that's what happens. And the same thing. So with the police reform, it's the police are to blame. You're like, well, I think maybe the police probably could do a little better job with some of the things that you guys question that have happened in the past in Baltimore. But the idea that this conversation isn't two ways, where it's like, well, the police should be able to turn around and say, hey, it's been hard to police this community. It's been difficult. We need to get to a place with both education, with policing, and really with the entire setup in Baltimore. There has to be a personal responsibility element. And I wish I had like a bill we could put in that would do that. I don't, but I do know we have to try to fight for better accountability and also encourage people. Let's find some solutions outside of just spending more money on the same failed structure, because that's really what Kirwan does. It just spends more money on basically on top of, there was a few changes that were good, but basically on top of the same failed structure that we've had for the last 20 years in public education. Well, so I know I've made you all feel a lot better about the situation now. So.
And in Baltimore City, Justin, Senator Reedy, it's more than 20 years. I taught in Baltimore City public schools. My kids are 35 and 33.
That's right.
I taught when they were in early elementary school. My kids went to Baltimore City public schools, and they were nearing the end of elementary school when I realized that they were running out of time to teach science. And so I took them out of public school and put them in a private school because I think science is pretty important. But I think it boils down to accountability. It's larger than just accountability. Senator Reedy, you did a great job summarizing. It's a holistic system we have to look at. However, Carroll County does an excellent job of making sure that kids read at grade level by 3rd grade. And, those policies were put in place decades ago when Delegate Sue Krebs was on the school board. And Carroll County educators school system made a commitment that was important. Kids need to read on grade level by 3rd grade. And if Baltimore City would do that and make that a priority, I think we'd see much greater success. But instead, what we're seeing is kids that are being failed, like the one that's now gone viral, who, was graduating with a 0.013 grade point average, had missed so many days. Well, some of that responsibility certainly lies on the mother and, most of it on the kid who didn't go to school, but a school system that he failed English 1 and they push him through to English 2.
That's
and
right.
This young man very potentially cannot read and write functionally. I mean, how do you get that far and you haven't even shown up to class? He may be struggling academically. So, we have some problems, but I guess most frustrating to me is we are talking about it because we care deeply about the kids of Baltimore City. And I cannot find an elected official in Baltimore City who will join us and say that. While Fox 45, which is not your viewing audience, has been running story after story after story about the failures of Baltimore City public schools. And if it was our county, if it was Baltimore, Hartford, Howard, Carroll, our hair would be on fire. And we would be at the school board and we would be at that school and we would be telling parents. And I can't find one elected official from this city that will stand up for these kids. And tell me if I'm wrong, Justin and Reed, do you know one of them? Not one of them. And then they look at us and say, you don't represent Baltimore City.
That's right.
I don't know. I don't know what to do about that. Tell us, how do we get those folks to stand up and yell and scream and be as upset as you and I are about this situation?
Yeah, it's tremendous apathy, I think, is what we see from time to time. And every once in a while, we'll have a really good conversation with one of our colleagues and really find some common ground on some of these issues. But it's just very hard to get a sort of critical mass of accountability. And really, there's always a reason why it's explained away, or it's an exaggeration, or it's somebody attacking, it's an outsider attacking our city. And it's like, honestly, that might be how it is with some people. That's not what we're about. That's not what I've ever been about. I'm about solutions. And like I said, if somebody tells me the plan, you talked Delegate Krebs, absolutely. That was a big priority when she was on the school board in Carroll County. She and other school board members, and she's continued to fight for that in the House of Delegates. You tell me we think this program will work to have kids reading, on grade level by third grade. I'm like, hey, let's look at that. I'd be willing to do that. I'll go argue with voters who say not another dime for Baltimore, and I'll say, you know what, I'll support that. But that's not what we're getting. That's not what we're getting, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you guys all bring up, great points. And as heartbreaking as it is, I've done some volunteering in Baltimore City, and when you meet someone who you can tell just by the way they speak that they don't read at a level of someone who should graduate high school or write it. How do those people really? How are they supposed to advance in society? And it's really sad, and there's not an obvious answer. But I guess kind of on that somber note, we're approaching the end of our hour here. I want to give everyone the opportunity to say, maybe there's something you didn't get a chance to say or some final thoughts. We'll start with Reed, and we'll go, to Reed, then Kathy, and Justin.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone hosting this, and I'll make it real quick. So one thing that has been truly exacerbated during this entire year that we've had out of school, basically not learning, is that the people with means are actually doing better. And I say that with all deference. My wife works out of the house. Between the two of us, we have 4 different paying jobs. So we're working our butts off, right? But what we were able to do is, first of all, bring our daughter up to Carroll County to do sports, which was awesome because we live right there. And then we also hired tutors. Not everyone can do that. Just like Corine was mentioning, not everyone can, do homeschooling. So only the people who cannot afford to make up that lack of education in this closed environment are doing worse and worse and worse. They're getting further behind. And we're doing anything we can and everything we can to try to make a difference, to open back up the schools, to help all of us. It's not about my kid, it's about all of our kids. So I'm just very, hopefully heartened that we're going to be back there soon, but also disappointed over the last year that we've been in this situation. So Delegate Szeliga, over to you.
Yeah, I agree. The number one issue that I think we've dealt with in Annapolis this year is COVID. That's been on the mind, heart, mind, and actions of everything, at the top. And we, in a bipartisan fashion, passed the Relief Act, which delivered relief to people who were harmed, lost their jobs, lost their businesses, because of no fault of their own, because of a pandemic that closed their business or stopped their job. And so I'm proud that we work in an environment that's not DC, where on a lot of things we do get along and we do agree and we can work cooperatively. Obviously, policing has not been one of those, and we disagree on opening the schools. But I think that the next focus now has got to be getting kids back in school. And, we're going to fight tooth and nail for that, because we know not just academically, but psychologically and for so many reasons, the achievement gap is just, it keeps me up at night. It's what Reed said. The achievement gap is growing and growing and growing. And we've got to do something to address that. We cannot leave the kids behind who really can't learn virtually. Their family situation is not conducive to that, or just academically it doesn't work for them. So we've got to do that. And that's a commitment that we're making to the public, that we're going to push that until it happens.
I can't say it really any better than Delegate Novotny and Delegate Szeliga. I don't think we have any idea of necessarily the negative impact, really, that this has had. We need to get our children back in. I think it's a key to breaking some of the fear about COVID. Is once kids really get back, I'm somebody who's been careful. I've followed a lot of the protocols, even things I didn't agree with necessarily. I've followed them. But there is a fear. There's sort of an irrational fear from some people that I think once we're able, especially as the vaccine becomes more available, I think there's really, once kids go back in, it's going to help. And I think just a common sense education policy, and kids need to be in the classroom, they need to be learning. I think when that can be achieved, it'll be a great thing for not just for the kids, which is most important, but also I think for the parents and the community. And so we're going to continue to push to do that. And we appreciate the chance to be on with you all and those that were watching. And it's nice to be able to talk among friends and kind of vent a little bit after a tough few weeks. And we look forward to talking again in the future. And thank you all in Montgomery County. It's tough for us in Annapolis. We know it's tough for you in Montgomery County. So we appreciate the work you're doing to build the party and fight for our values as well. So thank you.
We'll adopt all of you as our delegates and senator. I'll turn it over to Corine to close us out.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, thank you guys for joining us tonight. One thing that really showed through is, we are all Republicans and we do have some shared values, but we're also parents and students and teachers and community members. And we all want what's best for our children. And these are not talking points. We are desperate to do what's best for our kids, and we're desperate to do what's best for our community. So I really just want to keep the focus on that. And I think you guys did a really great job of explaining how you guys at Annapolis are trying to do that for us at home. So with that, I'll just say thank you again, Delegate Reed Novotny, Senator Justin Reedy, and Delegate Kathy Szeliga. And then I also definitely want to thank Ryan Gniadek, our data director, and Marcus Alzona from the Montgomery County Club, just for helping me ask some great questions and find some really great perspective tonight. So thank everybody for joining. And I'm Corine Frank, Executive Director for the Maryland Republican Party. Thank you guys so much.